I'm Tavis, Smiley. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number 1-800-920-1580. 1-800-920-1580. In this hour, on the 54th anniversary of the assassination of MLK, Atlanta-born Grammy-winning artist and songwriter Michael Render, a.k.a. Killer Mike, of the hip-hop duo Run the Jewels. Killer Mike has been an active solo artist for over 20 years now, releasing studio albums and mixtapes while also collaborating on projects with some of the biggest names in hip-hop, including Outkast, Jay-Z, Big Boy, Black Thought, and more. In addition to his amazing success as a musician, Killer Mike has acted in a number of film projects and is now hosting his own national TV show called Love and Respect with Killer Mike. With all that, Mike is an unapologetic advocate for the disenfranchised and an entrepreneur. Among other business enterprises, he is the co-founder of Greenwood Bank. I am pleased to have in this hour Killer Mike. Mike, how are you, sir?
Oh man, when one of your heroes talk good about you, you get to grinning and looking goofy like you're in the fifth grade again. Tavis, I'm honored. I'm honored to be on your show. I was honored to be on your television show. I'm truly honored to know my grandma and mama are somewhere with the ancestors. Like, I told you that boy was going to do good. He surprised us because we thought he was going the other way sometimes. You know? My grandmother adored you, man, so it was an honor. And I can invoke her name and say it fun. She would be very proud. So I'm very happy to be here.
No, I'm honored to have you on the program, and thank you for the time. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I don't know if the room you're in or where you're talking into a device.
I moved to another one. I was talking through my AirPods.
Okay. Yeah.
But I moved to. Let me see if this works, because otherwise I would have to speakerphone.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I just don't. You sound a little better now. I don't want the audience to miss anything you have to say in this hour, because what you have to say is always so vitally important. But let me start though by saying I thank you for the honor of talking to you and for those kind words. I appreciate it, and to hear the words of your grandmother about the work and witness I've tried to engage means a great deal to me. So thank you again. Just know that the love is mutual, and that's why I always enjoy being in dialogue with you. Let me start this hour by asking you this. I said a moment ago, this is the 54th anniversary, of course, of the death of MLK. We've spent the majority of our 3-hour program today, at least the last 2 hours. You are the third hour, but we spent the first 2 hours talking primarily about his life and legacy all these years later. I've been in Atlanta more times than I can count in the course of my life. I never come there, even if I'm there for just 12 hours. I never come to Atlanta without going to the King Center and bowing down and paying respect to MLK. As I said many times, I regard him as the greatest American this country's ever produced. But let me ask you this. I never asked you this question. What's it been like growing up in the city that is King City? I mean, he was born there. His church is there. I mean, that was the place in which he was steeped. So what's it been like for you growing up in this city that bears his name pretty much everywhere you look?
For me, it has been. I would do interviews and get in trouble after I became a national person recognized as nationally speaks. And I can't call myself a national spokesman for anything, but I try to honor my grandparents' wishes in, making sure their name is of good character in our community and helping black folks and not embarrassing Negroes, as my grandfather would say. Mm-hmm. Growing up here, you couldn't tell me anything was impossible. Mm. I grew up in a neighborhood called the Collier Heights that was started in 1946 by black people, for black people. Mm-hmm. His parents and sister, I believe, moved to that. I grew up right in the same neighborhood as Bernice King, same high school, Frederick Douglas High School. I would argue that the greatest America's produced is tied between Martin King and Frederick Douglass. Mm-hmm. And, the King became a martyr, and ultimately that might edge him out for the one. But he and Frederick Douglass have tremendously shaped my life. And Dr. King, in that, not only did you have Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard that went straight through the Adamsville Collier Heights community, that boulevard wasn't so blighted with crime and violence that it's one of the ones you look at and say, well, I don't know why, because right on that boulevard is the Plainville community, right on Martin King Boulevard is the Adamsville community. And it had all black people, everybody from top to bottom looked like me. My heroes look like me. My villains look like me. And that is the way I learned what he meant when he said character versus color. Mm. I learned to judge the character of people because all I had around me were black people. Billy McKinney, Cynthia McKinney, Dr. King, the former coach over at Morehouse in the 50s and 60s. I had the Black Bootlegger and Numbers Man. All these people were in my community, and all these people donated to the marches, and all these people wanted to see better for black folks because Dr. King was not an anomaly in Atlanta. You know, he was a young, brilliant man who, when given the opportunity, did what people in our community are trying to do, to do right, to be of good conscience, to be of the work of Jesus. I'm not a practitioner of any Abrahamic religion, but the character of Jesus in the Bible is one of the greatest examples of love for your fellow human being I've ever read about. And King is truly comparable to that in his values as a Christian minister. When you look at, oftentimes, the last person thought about in our society is the prisoner. The last person that Christ saved while on earth was a prisoner. Dr. King cared about prisoners. He cared about the poor, the downtrodden, the worker. That is something that was in Atlanta before him. That is something that he learned, he grew, he expanded the philosophy of. That is the work of dozens of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people you never knew before him come to perfection in his lifetime, in his body. We were robbed of what could have been by an assassination, but growing up in Atlanta, Dr. King gave you hope. I went to Frederick Douglas High School. He went to Booker T. Washington High School. High schools aren't even 5 miles from each other. Can other people outside of Atlanta imagine the equality you feel? I don't have to search for equality when my rival school is Benjamin E. Mays. I go to Frederick Douglass. My rival school is Benjamin E. Mays. You guys Google that name, former president of Morehouse. All of our teachers basically come out of either HBCUs or come out of Booker T. Washington High School. So that it really is the closest I've seen or felt to a black world outside of, say, Jamaica or in Africa has been Atlanta. And Dr. King, growing up in this world, learned character, learned equity, learned equality, and he perfected that through his studies of Christian studies, through his studies of Mahatma Gandhi and other people. And he took what Atlanta made him, and he sharpened that knife to the greatest degree he could. So growing up in Atlanta for me was one of very high hopes and very high expectations that you would meet the mark of a Martin King or die trying to.
Yeah. See, I love talking to you because you always make me think, and you've done it already. So when we come forward, I want to come right back to this point you made 5 minutes ago. I've said repeatedly in my career, and I'll say it once again, that I regard King as the greatest American this country's ever produced. I've had two people in all the years I've been saying that, and I've been saying it for as long as I can remember, because that's what I believe. I've had two people debate me about that. One person debated me on the virtues of FDR. One person debated me on the virtues of Abraham Lincoln. No one has debated me on Frederick Douglass. So when we come forward, since you think it may be a tie between MLK and Frederick Douglass, I want to hear more about why you put Frederick Douglass on that particular mantle. I'm just curious. I want to hear more about it. We're talking to Killer Mike in this hour. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us. I'm Tavis, Smiley. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. It's hard to step on Killer Mike when he's dropping bars like that. But I gotta keep this conversation going, particularly because he's already titillated me with his read, his frame on the fact that there might be a tie for the greatest American this country's ever produced. My sense is that person is Atlanta's own MLK. And Killer Mike said, well, maybe Tavis, there's a tie between MLK and Frederick Douglass. All right, Killer Mike, unpack that for me. Mike, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't hear you, Mike.
Yes, I can.
All right.
Well, I had my phone on mute.
All right.
So, my bad.
So unpack that for me.
So Dr. King definitely gets an edge because he became a martyr. He did not just become a martyr for black people. He became a martyr for anyone in this country fighting for the civil, social, and just basic human rights in this country and beyond. He was absolutely against the war machine. He was absolutely for the people. In his last 2-3 years, Operation Breadbasket, economic equality was the line he was pushing. He was 70% disliked by members of his own religious community and black Christians at the time and overall. So he sacrificed a lot, and I'll give you the edge on that. But I never want people to forget Frederick Douglass.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Frederick Douglass had had his way, the women's suffrage movement would not have separated from the civil rights movement, and you wouldn't have had the Daughters of the Confederacy pop up. You wouldn't have had Jim Crow laws popped up in the way they did. Because a lot of people don't know, when blacks got the right to vote initially, what we got was black men had the right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And black women stood outside the churches where we were voting with shotguns and rifles and made sure that the night riders or Ku Klux Klan wasn't going to come. Frederick Douglass understood, and there's a famous quote, I have to find it, but something is of no sex, something else is of no color. What he was basically saying, and not basically saying, he said, women deserve the right to vote at the exact same time men do. That there's no civil rights for man, that a man deserves that a woman does not. So he was 100 years ahead of the schedule.
Mm.
He was the most photographed person of the 19th century. And for you guys who want to put that into some context, it's arguably the most photographed person of our last century has probably been Barack Obama. So Frederick Douglass is bigger than Barack Obama. Frederick Douglass was an advisor to presidents. He was a thread in this nation at a time where it was pulling itself apart. And I'm talking about the white folks with the Civil War and things of that nature. He was a thread that kept this nation, helped this nation. I don't even allow my friends to interject John F. Kennedy's or Abraham Lincoln's because they showed they were willing to compromise to our worst conditions.
Mm-hmm.
They were, Kennedy, I can recall a famous James Baldwin quote when he was talking about the Kennedys, and he literally said, they just got off the boat a few years ago, and you're asking him, do you ever see, I think it was Bobby Kennedy asked, do you ever see a Negro becoming president? Baldwin was like, we have literally built this country through cotton and servitude, and you have the audacity to ask the son of a man who immigrated here, do you ever think essentially a Negro ever deserve or earn that right? So we've had a lot of people beyond King that really called this country to task. But Frederick Douglass, I never want people to forget the quote, it is easier to build strong children than repair broken men.
Mm-hmm.
I never want people to forget that he was for women's suffrage before women's suffrage was the thing to do. He was 100 years ahead of the country. I never want people to forget that if you don't have him advising a Lincoln was totally willing to compromise and let slavery still exist. If you don't have Frederick Douglass as the grand speaker of the abolitionist movement and pushing the line, along with people like Harriet, of course, along with people like Sojourner Truth, you never get a Dr. King because you never get an Atlanta. Mm-hmm. You never get the city that produces that because you never get John Wesley Dobbs, who was Maynard Jackson's grandfather. Mm-hmm. You never get the Atlanta conference between W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. You never get the conditions that are created to create a king if you never have a Douglass. So I'll digress and definitely give King the top spot. But I would like to say to black people, beyond Dr. King, we have a legacy of other leaders that created the conditions to create a king. Yeah. And in invoking Dr. King, we have to remember that the dream is a result of the work that these people put in. And no other American, arguably besides Dr. King, has put in the type of work to get us to a functioning community that could create an Atlanta, that creates a Dr. King, that creates a civil rights movement, that creates the SCLC, that creates a school where at least 30 to 40% of schools are named for black educators and emancipation. You don't get that without a cornerstone. And I would argue that Frederick Douglass is that cornerstone not only for the black community, but for this country. Every child in this country, there should be a Frederick Douglass High School in Iowa where no black kids in that town, because that's how great of an American he is. Mm. You don't get America held to task on its Constitution if you do not get an American like Frederick Douglass. When he says education makes one unfit to be a slave, when you really sit down, I want all black people to sit down on themselves today. So when's the last time I read a book? When's the last time I read a book about me? When's the last time I tried to educate myself about something I'm ignorant on purposely? Think about that. It makes you unfit to be a slave. Mm. So if you don't get a man with that mentality in the 1800s, do you get a 16-year-old graduating Booker T. Washington High School, going to Morehouse College, understanding what his mission is and what his purpose is. You know, so I just I don't give you much pushback, but I just want people to remember there was a man named Frederick that helped the conditions that happened in Atlanta in the 30s, 40s, 50s. That his life is the cornerstone for that too.
That's why I love you, Mike. It's a strong argument, and you get no pushback from me whatsoever. First of all, on two things come to mind. Literally just a few days ago on St. Patrick's Day, I spent an hour talking about Frederick Douglass, and people were like, why Frederick Douglass on St. Patrick's Day? Because Frederick Douglass, as you know, went to Ireland and spent some months in Ireland, and I really wanted the audience to understand why Douglass went to Ireland, what those months were like in Ireland, what he took from that trip to Ireland, and what he did when he came back to the United States of America. And so we spent an hour just a few days ago on this program, an entire hour, talking to a scholar about Frederick Douglass in Ireland and his post-trip, his return, I should say, back to the States, and what he did when he got back here from that experience. The second thing that I want to that comes to mind when you talk about Douglass is, and you know this well, and you kind of intimated a moment ago, that people forget that Abraham Lincoln, Mike, started out, as you well know, on the wrong side of the slavery question. Lincoln's on the wrong side of the slavery question. And there is no Abraham Lincoln getting on the right side, or as James Brown might say, the Godfather, getting on the good foot. Abraham Lincoln does not get on the good foot without Frederick Douglass.
Absolutely. Does not happen. Absolutely does not happen. And I'm glad that you let people know that he was an international.
Yes.
As was Martin. And I'm glad you invoked Ireland, because a lot of people don't, like I tell my friends, like I say, we have to understand that a lot of what has been done to us, they practiced on each other before they got to us. And now what was most vicious about us is that, they robbed us of the history of who we truly were and are, But what they did to us, and when I say they, what I mean is the United Kingdom and allowing slavery and Portugal and Belgium and all these other countries is they had already done at wars when they were already hanging each other. They were already mutilating each other. And Douglass having an opportunity to go around the globe and study and confer with people who did look like him and understand the moves, and motivation of the people that he was now dealing with in the ruling class in his country, that the legacy of he is not celebrated enough in this country. And I'm not just talking about black folks.
Yeah.
If you're going to have those slave masters on the dollar, and my children have to know them. And I will be the first to say, these slave masters are here. We understand they own. We understand the operations they move by. They happen to have written one of the greatest articles of freedom on paper I've ever seen. And I balance that on a daily basis. I tell people, but you're going to have to start understanding that when you teach white children American history, the first thing they need to learn is Crispus Attucks was a black man, and he died on behalf of this country before anyone.
Yes.
When you teach white children about the benevolence of Abraham Lincoln, you're going to have to say that he was literally taught, advised, and counseled by Frederick Douglass on the way to do this and the way to do this right. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to teach black people that Frederick Douglass was a landowner and a businessman as well. We're going to have to start to teach the whole truth in order to be a whole country and make amends without hurt, like James Baldwin constantly challenged us to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you on that, and I appreciate you doing that, because I had forgotten all about the island trips. But this is the result of growing up in Dr. King City. Yeah. This is the result of going to Frederick Douglass High School. This is the result of having Dr. Samuel L. Hill as your principal, and having Miss Baraki as your social studies and world history teacher, who was taught by Dr. Asa Hilliard. This is the result of all this work, and I just challenge us to do more of this. Even if you are the minority in where you are, we're 8 or 9% in LA. Find time on the weekends to get together and talk about how bad black people are. And I don't mean bad in the bad. I mean bad like they meant when James Brown said it. Talk about all the good stuff, all the dope stuff. Just get together for an hour the same way we do these vision board meetings, whatever my wife's doing this month, right? The same way we do this. Find time to get together, to have some champagne and orange juice, and simply talk about how dope Harriet is. I don't mean watch a movie and debate the movie. I mean to read some paragraphs, to discuss how it makes you feel, to make sure your 12-year-old daughter is there. To my white friends and allies and colleagues, it's time you brush up past the big names that you already know. Because in this season, Dr. King is the man. We already know the mark he's met. But let's make sure that we know that there were men named Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, who I consider the cornerstone, that helped set up the environment to be able to produce this so that we can start to produce some on y'all side. You know?
Yeah.
Every American should know Dr. King and celebrate him.
Yeah. This is unfair to do with a minute to go, but let me tell you where I want to go on the other side of news and traffic, which I have to do in about a minute here. I am fascinated. Every time I talk to you, I'm always fascinated by just the depth of your intellect. And it's clear that you are such a voracious reader. You started out saying, how nice it is to talk to your hero. No, man, you my hero, because I just love the way your mind works. And I love how you connect these dots. What I want to talk about when we come on the other side of news and traffic is how all this experience growing up in Atlanta, how all this reading that you're doing, all this stuff you've been exposed to, how all of that shows up in your artistry. I'm specifically talking about your music. We've played a number of your tracks already. We'll play some more as we move forward in this hour, but I'm curious as to how all of that informs what you do when you get on the mic. We are talking, speaking of the mic, to Killer Mike. More with him. I want to get an answer to that question. Again, a great deal more when we come forward in conversation with Killer Mike. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. So glad to have you along in this hour for our conversation with the always brilliant Killer Mike, one half of Run the Jewels. So, Mike, I'm getting all kind of messages. I want to read this one to you because it leads into what I want to talk about. This is just one of many messages I'm getting. Killer Mike is a monster, Tavis, as usual. He might be my favorite guest on your KBLA show thus far. Absolutely phenomenal. No MC loves black people as much as he loves black people, and that's why I love that cat. Talk to me about why it is that you love black people so much, because to my mind, and if and when people say that about me, it's the most amazing compliment that I can receive when people say Tavis loves his people. I've said many times about Minister Farrakhan, you can agree or disagree, but you cannot argue that Negro loves his people, and the same can be said of Killer Mike. Killer Mike loves his people, but as you know, Negroes ain't always easy to love, Killer Mike.
Nah. I'm not always easy to love. You can ask my wife.
Yeah.
Shout out to Shay Bigger down in Savannah. But listen, I'd be lying if I told you that don't bring some water to my eyes. I love us.
Mm.
And I'm listen, and this was funny to get out of this moment. I love you Negroes that don't even like or love me.
Mm.
I see your comments. I get it from everywhere. I get it from the conservatives. I get it from the super liberal. I get it from the super woke. I get it from the people who dance as a doorknob. But after all that, I know that you are part of Earth's original people. I know that God saw fit to put us here to create all that is around us in terms of civilization. If you never have a black woman in the Horn of Eastern Africa who can create any race, her babies can be as light as an albino or as dark as a Sudanese child. If you don't have that, none of this exists. So I am absolutely in love with black people. I'm absolutely in love with the Collier Heights community. I'm absolutely in love with the west side of Atlanta. I'm absolutely in love with the deep south. I'm moving a little because I want to make sure I say this book, because I want all those black people to go out and get this book and realize 54% of us still live in the deep south. But I want you to go out and get The Devil You Know by Charles M. Blow. Because once we understand that we just people, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to be right. We're going to be wrong. But if we grant each other grace and mercy and compassion, if we do that, we can be the people God meant us to be. You know what was so? Because I got to talk about who he married in a minute. Because amazing about Martin King Jr. is the grace of Christ that he gave you, the mercy and the compassion to understand those that didn't even agree with him. Negroes got mad because I sat down with a governor named Kemp, because he's the governor, and I pay taxes. And they forgot that King had to sit down with a devout racist named Lyndon Baines Johnson. And he and Johnson had to sit across from the desk, and Johnson had to say, well, you got to go back out into the world. You got to make me do it, because I'm a Southern white man, so I can't just fold. So you got to go organize people. I'm not going to give you money. I'm not going to give you help. I'm not going to give you support. I'm not even going to give you a pat on the back, but I'm giving you the charge to go do it. And he and a bunch of other young black men, including Andy Young, Joseph Lowry, Reverend James Owens, Ralph David Abernathy, they went in, and women, Dorothy Cotton, his own wife, Coretta, they had to do it. So I love black people. I don't care how you feel about me. That's not my business. I love you. And I love you because I grew up in an all-black neighborhood. I had all-black teachers. My schools was named for all black people. If a politician rewarded us, or not rewarded us, if they did something good on our behalf, they were black. If they messed it up, they was black. My grandmother, who was fiercely SCLC member, Democrat, I loved her because she was black. My grandfather, that was conservative and suspicious of all government, probably could be labeled libertarian, love him because he's black. So I love us. Absolutely, I love us. So whoever wrote that, thank you. Because you get it. You don't have to agree with me. I don't have to agree with you, but we still going to be at the family reunion together.
Say a word to me, Mike, about this notion that you raised a moment ago that just hit me in my heart, man, that if we grant each other grace, if we find the capacity to grant each other grace, say a note to me about why you think it is that more of us need to embrace and be steeped in what it means to be graceful, to offer grace to each other.
Again, I qualify this because I tell people I don't practice an Abrahamic religion, but I was raised in the church. I was raised in Mount Olive Baptist Church, Bethlehem Healing Temple, Bishop Jean Church. I was raised in the church. I was raised under the stewardship of one male preacher and two female preachers. So I got a very balanced view of the church, in my opinion. I told my friend, hey, man, you know what I came to realize? He said, what? I said, even if Jesus ain't real, black people have made him real. Mm-hmm. I said, if you've heard a black woman, like your grandmother, your mother, you've heard a black man, like your grandfather, your uncles, your father, say the word Jesus. It invokes a far different power to me in a black church than when I went to some other churches. It has invoked, even if not real, an example through the words that I read about the person called Jesus. It has invoked an example for how if I, as a human being, am willing to live my life, not only will I live a life filled with joy and peace, I will grant that to others through grace and mercy and kindness and fellowship. If I can manage to do that, if we can manage to do that as black people, we're unstoppable. Now, the thing is, we've managed, because some people say, well, you forgive other people and you work for them. It's just that you cope so that you don't explode in the worst case scenario of what happens to a dream deferred. You know, you cope. But if we can get past, because when black people say black people don't forgive each other, no, it's just that you've hurt each other, your family, you can't cope. But man, if we manage to get beyond coping and actually give each other grace, to actually give each other mercy, what would the laws, pre-marijuana revolution, have been 30 years ago in Atlanta if we would have understood the drug wars being used against us? Mm-hmm. We don't care what the statewide rules are. We can't allow this to happen. We're going to have to figure this out a different way. That's what I challenge that book I just told y'all about. Grab that book. That's what you can do is you migrate back south and you move to Atlanta, Charlotte, Tampa, Birmingham. That's what you can start to do. Jacksonville, Savannah, Macon, Jackson, Mississippi. That's what you can start to do. You can start granting each other grace in your daily. Somebody step on your Nike. Bro, I apologize. Excuse me, bro. No, it's okay, dog. That's what they make shoe cleaners for. They just shoes. How your grandparents would tell you. if you can start to say, because I know it's so tempting to young people out there, and I know they might not be listening all the time, those old folks talk, but start wanting to say, hey, if you can manage to be patient and not take from someone, if you can manage to do that, it's going to be okay. You're going to get the stuff you want. You're going to get to be lit, but you don't have to hurt your neighbor to do it. You don't have to break in their house. If we can start to engage each other from that place, man, oh, how much more wonderful people we'll be. Because I love us. I'm proud of us, man. You know, and I just know that with all we've managed to do in this country, we haven't been free a full 60 years yet.
Mm-hmm.
I remind people of that. I say, man, my parents grew up in apartheid, essentially. Now, theirs, on my side of town, it was self-imposed. Them black folks in the working class to the rich folks, they didn't necessarily want to live next door to. They didn't trust that, Mm-hmm. But I hope that I see that in my lifetime. I smile as I say that. I really hope that I get to see us grant each other's mercy and grace and give each other praise and adorn one another. Because we are beautiful. Absolutely. We are beautiful.
Mm.
Let me get you. Oh, my bad. You got to go.
No. Hold that thought. I promise I'll come right back as quickly as I can. I'll make this we'll make this a short break, and we'll get right back to you. But I'm with Killer Mike. In the words of my friend George Wallace, I love black people, and there ain't nothing y'all can do about it. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
You don't deserve the spit that they hurled up in your face and shit. My name is Michael Render, and we're the new Avengers. We here to tell you all your false idols are just pretenders. They corporation slaves and ditch it to all the lenders. So even if you got 7 figures, you still a new. Some men are meant for the light to be shined.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward. Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Finish your point. I cut you off, man. Finish your point. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's been surmised in terms of my feelings for Dr. King. I have in hip hop we argue and we go back and forth, we rap battle. But here are my truest feelings on the reading, the knowing, the legacy of, the personally being trained to organize by James Orange. You guys, please Google that name.
Oh, yeah.
As Omar played him in Selma. And he was, Tavis will co-sign what I'm saying. If you were trained to organize by James Orange, you were an organizer.
Oh, yes.
And so this is who I am. This is a 15-year-old kid trained that role with, Joseph Lowry, James, still talks to Andy to this day as a friend and mentor. And so I am directly out of the lineage of Martin King, and I don't think about that often. And we'll stop right there. Pin that. I don't think about that often. But this is the truest feeling I've had of Dr. King. It's a song of mine called Untitled. You can go to YouTube. You can go to Untitled. And when I rap about, potentially dying and my wife, comparing her to Coretta, and you'll get it when I say this verse, she's in there. There's my wife in there. So I encourage y'all, go check out the YouTube. Check out that one. But the verse is, you are witnessing elegance in the form of a black elephant, smoking white rhino on terraces. Now, old folks out there that's listening, I'm describing me in that moment, and I'm telling you I'm smoking a very high-potent marijuana because in my mind, I'm imagining standing on the Lorraine Motel. In my mind, as an artist, I'm taking you out through the process of an artist. Rappers don't often do this, and you often don't regard rap as art. But in my mind, I imagine myself an African elephant. That's a spirit animal. I invoke it. I said a couple songs ago, Tavis played, you listen to it, this is elegance in the form of a black elephant. But in my mind, I'm standing on that terrace, and I ask myself a question, and here's where it gets good. Will I die slain like my king by a terrorist? Will my woman be Coretta, take my name and cherish it? Or will she Jackie O, drop the Kennedy, remarry it? My sister says necessary on some Cleopatra. My grandmother said, nope, never, that's a sacrilege. I tend to agree because the thought is so disparaging. Now, in there, what I'm saying is, I'm thinking all this stuff I'm saying, running around on the behalf of black folks. Because at this point now I'm imagining myself Martin. Will I die on this terrace like him? And then I say, well, after I die with my woman, my wife, I'm thinking about Shay. But I know this example because I've known Coretta my whole life. I've watched her. You've never seen grace and beauty. I don't care who sits on the throne anywhere else, ever. There has never been a more regal woman I've seen. I say, man, will my woman, will she do the Coretta? Will she hold me down, or will she Jackie O? And I wasn't criticizing Jackie O because she had to do that. Her husband's been assassinated. She has an opportunity to be protected, to be cared for the rest of her life. She would have been a fool not to. And then I say my sister says it's necessary if you die, your wife remarry. Also Cleopatra, because Cleopatra lost lovers. She had to multiple marry in order to keep her kingdom together. See, and Cleopatra is a black woman. So even in this, you getting the product of Martin Luther King, you getting the product of Morehouse College, the product of Martin. This ain't just some funky rap I'm writing. This is better than any rapper in your top 5 ever because of the level of thought and surrealism that I'm going deeper down a wormhole. Imagine yourself on the Lorraine Motel's balcony. Do you have the courage to take that bullet? Because every day it could have been that. Does your wife have the courage to pick up the mantle and for the next 30, 40, 50 years continue to do so? And after she go, your youngest daughter does that. So all of this stuff is his thought. And again, this is inspired by Martin. This ain't a rapper getting off on himself. This is me trying to think as Martin King. I says, my sister says it's necessary on some Cleopatra. My grandmother said, nope, never, that is sacrilege. I tend to agree because the thought is so disparaging. But the Lord give a load. You got to carry it like Mary did.
I got to do this, and I hate doing it. Our remaining moments for Killer Mike when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are witnessing elegance in the form of a black elephant.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
Sadly, I've just got 5 minutes left with Killer Mike. I could do this for another couple hours because now he's on a roll, right? It's amazing. I'm a lyricist, as you know. I love lyrics, and it's amazing to hear an artist of his stature break down his own lyrics, and particularly those lyrics, and especially on this day, the 54th anniversary of the assassination of MLK. I could do this for hours and just ask you to break down more lyrics, but let me manage the time I have left because there's so much going on in the world of Killer Mike. Mike, I'd be remiss if I didn't, in these few minutes I have left, ask you to say a word about Greenwood Bank, how that project is coming along, and also want to talk about your show, Love and Respect. So tell me about Greenwood Bank, brother.
Love and Respect airs on PBS, and it's going national. I want you guys to watch it on Friday night, and you can catch it on Revolt TV on Mondays. And I would like to say, man, thank you to Neo, who was at Tavis' show, who really showed me the ropes, and is really between him and Tavis, watching as an example, has taught me how to do a great show. Greenwood Bank is a fintech company. We are a banking institution. We are for black people. We are for Latino people. We are for working class white folks, people who ever want to move their money in a way that's positive, that's going to turn a positive dollar in the community. We've opened up the books. People are hitting me every day with their cards. I want you guys to check out my page, Killer Mike at Killer Mike just on IG, and I'll tell you more about that. But it's King's Assassination Day, so we got to finish this. Tavis, I'm going to do this, and then we out because we got 3 minutes. Women are one of the greatest spiritual manifestations turned physical. They are a portal from the spiritual into the physical. So when I said the Lord give a load, you got to carry it like Mary did, I'm talking about King. That's why I'm giving honor to all these babies' mamas. It takes a woman's womb, acknowledging his mother, who was also assassinated. It takes a woman's womb to make a Christ or Dalai Lama. The world might take that child, turn that child into a monster. The Lord will take a monster and fashion him a saint, and then I did this. I say I present you Malcolm X for those that's saying that he can't. So I'm never going to throw those brothers out there. I make King and X comparable because they were not Magneto and Professor X. They actually were brothers working toward the same goals, walking from a different direction, walking from different directions, but on the same pathway to freedom. And this is how we ended. You saying that he won't when I'm knowing that he will. But you usually don't know it's you until you getting killed for real. And that's what I'm saying about Dr. King. His work, he might have not even known he was a prophet. He might have not have known that he had the potential to change the world, but he knew he was called to do what was right, and he may have only known truly his power at his death. So I encourage all of us every single day to do what is right, to choose to be of good character, to do that so that when your eyes are finally resting, you can know that God had purpose for you.
Mic drop. Killer Mike, you a bad man.
Love you,
you a bad man. That's how you close the show. That's how you drop the mic, man. I love you back. Ain't nothing you can do about it, man. We will do this again. Never enough time with you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. You dropped some bars today, man. I love you for it. Please give my best to Rhonda. Tell Rhonda I said thank you for making all this happen today. And you stay strong until we talk again, my friend.
All right. Love and respect. Have a great day.
Love you, brother. Thank you. Man, ain't nobody like him. Ain't nobody like him. And no better way to close this show on this particular day as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm Tavis Smiley. Thanks for tuning in. Time to make room now for the midday Money Chain here on KBLA Talk 1580. Up next, the Millionaires Roundtable with Lynn Richardson, to be followed by Head of the Crypto Curve with Najee Roberts. Old money, new money, it don't matter. We got you covered. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Tavis Smiley, back here tomorrow morning. Lord willing to do it all over again. Until then, thanks for listening. And as always, keep the faith.